Adam Smith was a Scottish philosopher in the 1700s, often called the father of economics. In 1776, he wrote An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. To inquire about why some nations were wealthy and some weren't. He thought there was a hand, no, not a real hand, an invisible hand that guides the free market through people's own self-interest. That's right, he believed if everyone acted in their own selfishness, then the economy would prosper and they would grow into a wealthy nation without even needing a king to help it. People want to buy the cheapest products possible, producers want to sell for the most dollar bills they possibly can, and it was up to this magic invisible market to equalize it. If the whole nation did this and everyone specialized to make only what they're good at, we could trade with each other and maximize our gross domestic product, he said. Better yet, he argued we can and should trade over borders to specialize the whole country. Wonderful. The first modern man to really think of how to run an economy, and he told us not to run it at all. That same view wasn't shared by the German economist Karl Marx, most famous for co-writing the Communist Manifesto and later writing Das Kapital in 1867. He certainly didn't like Adam's selfish ideas. That whole capitalism thing, it was bound to fail in a bloody revolution. Why? Well, Karl believed the value of a good could be measured objectively by the amount of human labor put into making it, not by a magical hand. And thus, these bourgeoisie capitalists who capitalize on their capital exploit the proletariat working class by stealing what is their most important product, their labor, to profit for themselves. In fact, he thought capitalist profits could only be made through theft using this labor theory of value. Marx said this was going to blow up on itself as workers would become alienated, eventually revolt, and seize the means of production. Even though he's been fairly controversial in the West, his ideas have affected the lives of billions, especially in the two great powers of the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China. Another man whose ideas stimulated the lives of billions was English economist John Maynard Keynes. He never thought we should just let the economy be, especially after he personally saw how the Great Depression ruined millions of British and American lives. So he wrote his masterpiece, the creatively named General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. Real page-turner, huh? He argued the government needed to play an active role to stimulate what he called aggregate demand during economic downturns. The government could either do this by creating their own firms and services or cutting taxes to let the people decide how to spend their own extra money. At one point, he even went on the radio and told British housewives to spend to save the British economy during the Depression. He believed buying more things means firms need to make more things, hiring more people, and getting them out of the soup lines, which leads to more spending. Keynes told us the government should do this in downturns even if it means higher inflation and going into long-term debt, because after all, in the long run, we are all dead. But his biggest rival, Austrian economist and political thinker Friedrich von Hayek, thought this was a load of baloney. Friedrich lived through Austrian hyperinflation and saw his homeland fall to totalitarian rule, shaping his idea that the government shouldn't do a goddamn thing to the economy. He advocated for a total free market called economic liberalism and thought that socialist and welfare state policies were a slope to totalitarianism, or a road to serfdom, as he wrote about in his most famous work. One of his most important ideas was criticizing government price controls. If, according to the free market, the price of something was the accumulation of all that goods data, how could one entity know what the value is by themselves? The price is the speedometer of value, not the gas pedal. His anti-socialist, anti-welfare ideas were pretty controversial among his peers, but they had their counter-revolution to Keynes's with the rise of free market lovers such as Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, even if he said they didn't go far enough for him. And like Hayek, American economist Milton Friedman loved the free market too. He mostly believed in economic liberalism over government intervention, but Milton was special. He wasn't just an Austrian school copycat. Instead of letting the entire economy run free, he thought governments should control how much money was out there in the world, often called monetarism. He argued that prices were dependent on how much money there was out there, and by keeping the growth of the money supply stable, it would stabilize the whole economy and we would prosper. Not only that, but in the short run, pumping money into the economy can actually increase aggregate demand, lowering unemployment, but it means taking an inflation hit in the long run. And if that inflation was too high, he argued to slow down the money growth, even if it means taking an output hit in the short run. He worked closely with the US government and Federal Reserve in the 80s, and his ideas have stayed in the West more or less ever since.